We started a series a couple weeks ago called Soul Activity, and it's really our desire as we've worked through this series to look at what it is exactly that God desires us to do and to be, and what should our driving force be? What should our primary soul activity be? And one of the main passages that we've been looking at is where Jesus describes the Great Commandment. Let me just read it to you. Mark 12, beginning with verse 28, it says, "One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, of all the commandments, which is the most important? What should we really be about in God?" Verse 29, "The most important one," answered Jesus, "is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There's no commandment greater than these." And we've been looking at this great command of God and our soul activity, our loving God, loving other people. And we've really been trying to gain an imagination for what this looks like in real life. And the truth is that when we love deeply, as this command is commanding us to do, that means when we go through good times, they're usually better. But when we go through hard times, they're even worse. Because it breaks our heart, doesn't it? And I know that mothers especially know the truth of that. This morning, we're going to look specifically at this soul activity, this loving of God and others, with really looking at how do we live into this in real life, looking at the high highs and the low lows, the struggles that we run through in life. And I've asked Pastor Nathan to come and share a little bit about his story. He shared his story a couple of years ago, and I know some of you have never heard it, and I think it has some things to offer us on this topic. So Nathan, would you come?
Good morning. When Brian asked me to talk about my story, and we were talking about the dates and when things were falling into place, and it landed on Mother's Day, I wasn't real excited about sharing my story, which I'm usually one that loves to share stories. If you know me, if you spend any time with me, I am a storyteller, and I love doing that. And so today I want to share my story with you, and I want to encourage you, forewarn you, that this is a story of hope. There's tragedy and there's struggles, but it is a story of hope, because Jesus is my hope. And so I want to share that with you today. I want to share with you a few things. And so to start my story off, I want to introduce you to my best friend, my beautiful bride, Hannah. Hannah, the first time I ever met her, I was working at a church in Victor, Montana, and she and her mother were attending there. And she came up to me one Sunday, her and her mom, and they came up and they said, "We heard you didn't have any friends." I've been there for a little while, so I was like, "What?" And they said, I heard you didn't have any friends. And as a pastor, I take a little bit of offense to that, but that's okay. I let it slide, continue. And so she and her mother invited me to go and hang out. They said, "We want to be your friend. We know that you have people within the church that you hang out with all the time, but we want to provide something for you outside of that. We just want to give you friendship." And so I said, "Okay, well, what are you thinking?" And they said, "Well, we just saw in the newspaper that they have ballroom dance lessons that are free, and we want to take you to that. And you're tall and a guy, so you meet the requirements." It's like, awesome. Good thing coordinated. It doesn't have to be one of those qualities. But I was dating a girl at the time, and so I called her up and I said, yeah, this mom and her daughter want to go and take me out ballroom dance, doing these lessons and stuff. And I thought it'd be really cool because Prince Charming knows how to dance. So if I learned ballroom dancing and stuff, that'd be really cool. So I went with Hannah and her mother, and they decided that we were going to go to this ballroom dance lesson. And we walked in, and there was some funky music going on. And I get in there, and they say, this is polka ballroom dance lessons that we're going to do. And it was to polka music. And oh, so we're all like starting to like walk away, like back out, like, let's do this, let's get out of here. And everyone's watching us, so we're like, well, let's just do it. Let's just, just for, kicks and giggles, we'll go and we'll do it. We'll have some fun. And so we went and we did it. And I'm a horrible dancer. And Hannah and I were partnered up, and we're dancing around. And when I'm awkward, I like to say jokes, and I like to say things to break the tension. And so I was making a whole bunch of jokes, and Hannah and I kept on getting separated because I would be making her laugh too much, and then we would stop, and then people would run into us. And you can't have that. So they had us separated, and we became really good friends, and she became my best friend. And I was the girl back in Michigan ended up cheating on me, and so that relationship ended. And I told God I was all done looking. I didn't want to look any further. I don't want to be the fool anymore. And Hannah had become my best friend, and I still remember the day that I knew I was going to marry her. We were at the dancing, and I said something funny, and she laid her head right into my chest, and she's laughing really hard, and she pulled back her head and had this big old smile, and like the light hit and everything. It was like that awe moment. And I was like, oh, I'm going to marry this girl. And God's like, ha ha, idiot. You've been dancing with this girl for, all these months, and you didn't even know it. She was going to be your wife. And now I'm like, well, now I know that. Lord, you better start telling her that. And we continued on, and we started dating, and there's a lot of positives, and I highly recommend falling in love with your best friend and marrying them. The downside of that is you've said things honestly that you might have said differently if you were dating her. Like my mom's sugar cookies. Hannah baked some sugar cookies and asked me what I thought of them. And we weren't dating at that time, so I was like, they're good. They're not my mom's cookies, because those are the best. And so Hannah, for years, every time she'd bring me a plate of sugar cookies, she's like, they're not your mother's, but I guess they'll do. So the next picture is of me and Hannah on the happiest day, one of the happiest days of our lives, where we stood before God and we made a pledge to be married to one another and to commit our lives to one another. And I still remember my good friend, our pastor, Ken, he was standing down, and we were going to climb up on this rock, and he was really nervous about it because he's a heavier set fellow, and he was like, if I fall, it's going to be on YouTube and everything, and so he was really nervous about that. But I remember watching Hannah come down, and Ken kept on having to like, all right, stay here. I was like, I'll go get her. I'll bring her here. Like, they're walking too slow. Like, I'll go get her. It was one of the best days of my life, and it was amazing. And Hannah and I, we had this great relationship. We talked all the time, and we would go and walk our dog, and we would have these long conversations, and it was like the most blessing. The biggest blessing to our marriage was just this time that we'd shut off our phones, and we would go and walk Doug, and we would go and take him for a walk, and we got past the point of talking about the simple things of your day and everything, and we would talk about dreams and wants and all of these things and hopes. And I got a job as a fourth grade teacher, and God had just been blessing us. We've been working with the teens, and just she was my better half, and just an amazing blessing to my ministry. But my story takes a turn when we were driving down a road. We were heading to a concert, and I was pulling music in the truck, and Hannah was driving. And as we're cruising down the road, we hit this patch of ice, and we slide over 4 lanes of traffic. And I'm looking down. I don't even feel anything. I don't see anything. And Hannah goes, "I'm so sorry." And I look up at her, and I'm like, "What?" And as she does that, our car gets T-boned on my side, and Hannah's neck broke, and she was killed instantly. I had broken my collarbone, my scapula. I had 5 brain bleeds, 7 skull fractures. I had fractured all of my vertebrae. I was bruised on the side down. And the brokenness of our vehicle, I was on the passenger side of that. And the motor was 1.5 feet from where it would have normally been in the vehicle. And so we get to the hospital, and I have a brain injury, and they have to talk to you when you have a brain injury. They have to make sure that things are still firing and everything's going on. And so these poor nurses are having to ask me over and over again, "Who are you? Do you know where you're at? Do you know what's happened?" And I would say, "We were in a car accident, and my wife, she's in heaven, and that sucks, but I still love him." And then they'd have to ask me it again, and my nurses kept on having to leave the room because they couldn't keep it together. And I kept on saying that I love him, and they would hear about my love for my wife, and she's so amazing, and she's so beautiful, but she's in heaven, and I still love him. And my men's group, they came, and they decided that they were outside of the room, and they're like trying to figure out what to say to me. What do we say to our friend who lost, our brother who lost our sister that we love and we care about, and what do we say to him? And so they came in trying to find words. And as they tried to find words, God was using my broken body to speak to these men about loving their wives. And they were just these big burly men just in tears as I'm telling them to cherish their wives. Go home. Like they're like, we just want to stay with you. I was like, go home and spend the day with your wife. Go home and do this. Go tell her that you love her, because you'll never, ever say it to her enough. You'll never tell her that she's beautiful enough. You'll never say it enough for a lifetime. You won't get it in. It won't happen. And so you got to spend your time trying as much as you can. And so the time came for me to say goodbye to Hannah. And my senior pastor, he figured it out. I was too critical for them to take me from the hospital, and so they asked me to, or they figured out a way to bring Hannah back from the morgue to the hospital. And so they hadn't done this before, brought someone from a funeral home back to the hospital, and the lady that was actually on staff, the head of the nursing, it was her daughter's birthday, the day that they brought Hannah in. And because of the way that I spoke about Hannah, because of my love for my wife, she was so moved, and they arranged it. They took an ambulance and picked her up and brought her to the hospital. The people at the funeral home put her in this blue dress, and they did all of this, and she even, she came in and made sure on her daughter's birthday, on her day off, that this all went down so I could say goodbye to my wife before they cremated her. So Ken, my pastor, he came to me and he said, Nathan, we have Hannah downstairs and it's time for you to say goodbye. I was in a wheelchair, and they said, we want to do whatever it is, so whoever you want to invite to go with you, who do you want to do that? And at that point, I went over to Ken and I said, Ken, you'd been with me and Hannah, you did our premarital counseling, you were there at the 4 o'clock in the morning fight, and you were through all of it and all of the conversations, and I would be honored if you would go with me to say goodbye to my bride. Next, Ken rolled me over to my brother, and my brother and I, we didn't have a really great relationship growing up. Older brothers and younger brother, and I really became good friends with my brother when Hannah had been a part of our family. They really connected, and that kind of opened doors for us to really get close. And so I went to my brother and I said, I would be honored if he would go and say goodbye to my bride with me. If it wasn't for her, we wouldn't be as close as we are today. And then I get to my dad. And I look at my dad, and my dad's looking down at me in this wheelchair. And I say, Dad, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even know how to be a man who loves my wife. It wasn't for you loving Mom the way that you did, I wouldn't even know how. So I would be honored if you would go say goodbye with me to my bride. So at this point, 3 of the manliest men I know are rolling me down to the elevator, all in tears. All the nurses and everybody is just a wreck. They all know what's happening. And they roll me into this room with Hannah. And Hannah's a little bit of a Disney princess. She loves all the Disney movies and stuff. And so, there's a part of me that wants this whole kind of Sleeping Beauty moment. Because here she is, beautiful, not hardly a scratch on her. And, that whole true love's kiss, waking her up and everything. I was like, God, if you could do this. And so as I'm going down there, I'm just praying. I'm praying that God's going to work a miracle. Because, all those Sunday school stories are going on in my head. I'm praying to God to give me a Lazarus moment. The Jesus standing outside of the tomb, calling Lazarus out. I'm like, God, come move in a mighty way so we can point this to you. Like, we need a miracle. Like, think of all the good that could happen. Like, come on, God, make it happen. Like, it's easy. Like, you were there with, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You were in the furnace with them, and they walked through it, and not even their clothes were singed by it. You're a God that's mighty. You have the hands that could do anything. You could take away all the problems in the song that we're listening to. I know if you're able to save through the flames. Like, I know that our God has the ability to do all these things. Moses. These are all the stories that I grew up on. These are all the truths that I know about God, is that He is able. He can do it. So I prayed over Hannah. We prayed over her. And nothing happened. It didn't work. And so I'm like crying out again, God, where are you? Where are you, God? The thing is we get into these moments of pain, and it's hard for us to see clearly through all the tears. It's hard for us to see through all of the sorrow and the pain. But there's a story that doesn't get a whole lot of attention in Sunday school. You know, it's not Jesus walking on water. It's not Jonah and the whale. It's, not Noah and the flood. But it's the story of Stephen. And Stephen loved God. He loved God, and he was sharing some truths with some people, with some religious leaders of the time, and he wanted for them to wake up and see that God is so much bigger than this, and so much bigger than all of the ancestors and all of this stuff. Like, come see, come hear this. And so, in Acts chapter 7, verses 55 through 60, but Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God, and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Look, he said, I see the heavens open and the Son at the right hand of God. At this, they covered their ears. They yelled at the top of their voice. They all rushed at him, dragged him out of the city, and began to stone him. Meanwhile, the witnesses laid their clothes at the feet of a man named Saul. While they were stoning him, Stephen prayed, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Then he fell to his knees and cried out, Lord, do not hold the sin against them. When he said this, he fell asleep. When I look at the differences between these stories of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that, they stand up for God and they do what needs to be done and all this stuff, and God delivers them through without a scratch on them. But Stephen is martyred. He's stoned to death. But Stephen knows where God is, because he looks up to the heavens and he sees him. And the thing is when we have our eyes on Jesus, we can say some really crazy things. Like, Lord, forgive these people that are doing this horrible thing to me. Lord, when we see Stephen's story, Stephen knows where Jesus is. He knows where he is. And through all of that, through all of his circumstances, through all of this pain, this anguish, through all of his suffering, he knows where God is. And he has his eyes on him. And because of that, he's able to endure. He's able to not only endure, but he's able to forgive. He's able to give his spirit up to God and say this. And he's following the example of Christ on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. God will never leave you nor forsake you. Back in that room, saying goodbye, giving my last kiss to my wife before they would hand her to me in a box. Saying goodbye, and I'm asking for God to show up in a certain way. And just because he didn't show up in the certain way that I was asking for doesn't mean that he didn't show up. He was there. I just had a really hard time seeing him through my grief, through my tears. I wanted this miracle. And God was working something else that was also a miracle. Because my wife, I have a picture of her. She is one of those amazing people, but she had all these insecurities and all these things, and Jesus has come and he's rescued her from her sin. He paid the price on the cross so that she could have a life with him, that she could be there with him now. She lives in a place with a glorified body. She doesn't have all the cares of how many pounds do I need to lose before I feel good in a swimsuit feeling anymore. She doesn't have that. She doesn't need to care about that. She's with Jesus. And when you're with Jesus, it doesn't matter. And selfishly, I wanted her back. Life would be easier, I tell myself. Life would be a lot less painful. But God is good, and he cares about us. His arms were wrapped around me. The only reason why I can stand before you today is because I have a Lord that carries me. He has carried me through this storm. He's carried for me. There's a verse that I love, and it's in Psalms 55 or 56:8. You keep track of all of my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle, and you have recorded each one in your book. That's a God that cares about you. That's a God that, it wasn't like Hannah died and he was gone. He was there, moving in this place, bringing healing to my soul, speaking into my life. I had this conversation with my dad. It was one of the toughest conversations my dad probably ever had with me. He said, He goes, Nathan, I wish I could take this pain away from you. There's nothing I wish more than to be able to take this away from you or have something to at least say to you. But he's like, Grandpa still has Grandma. I still have your mom. I don't know this pain. I don't know this. I can't help you, and it kills me. And he held me, and we cried. And my mom, she prays for me all the time and wished that I would move back home to Michigan. I say, God has me. Because we got a God that loves us and that desires a relationship with us. He doesn't want to just sit back and watch the entertainment that is my life. He wants to be in it. He wants to be a part of it. He wants to be the focal point of it. And so, there's going to be difficult times in your life. There's going to be sorrow. The trick of it is really the miracle. When we keep our eyes on Jesus, when we look to Him, we can get through anything. Because He's good and loving. I've watched how God's changed my relationship over the last few years with my mother-in-law. Hannah was an only child, and her mom had been divorced, and it was just the two of them. And so, when Hannah and we got married, there's always struggles with in-laws. I don't know if I'm the only one that ever has those, but when you get married, you marry this beautiful, beautiful person, and you get all of her crazy family with them. And they're wonderful people. They are. They really are. But I struggled with my mother-in-law. We didn't see things eye to eye, and we butted heads, and both of us were stubborn, and I think that's why Hannah loved us. And so when Hannah was alive, her mother and I, we kind of bounced. It takes time to build those relationships and stuff. And then all of a sudden, my wife is gone. And my mother-in-law is hurting. And I'm hurting. And we're both processing our grief differently. And in doing so, we've hurt each other. And it's been difficult. But I've watched God work in my mother's life. And I call her my mother. She is my mother. I've watched Him work and bring healing into her life because she's had regrets. And this is her only child. And so I've been blessed by this relationship, by this, and it's been recent that I've realized how much of a blessing it is. But God has the ability to mend things. And I know I had this great moment with my mother-in-law, and we're in the driveway, and I just had given her one of Hannah's Bibles. And I'm holding on to her. And she's crying, and I'm like, I love you, Mom. You will always be my mother. I love you. And she's like, I love you, son. And we've gone through a lot the last 3 years. We've been in pain that we never thought we get through, and God has carried us through. And so I know that it's Mother's Day. And so my challenge and my hope is that husbands, you would cherish your wife. Wives, that you would cherish your husbands, that you would love them. Because we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And kids, to your mothers, they love you so much. They love you so much, and even when it's difficult, I know that there's difficult times and there's struggles and there's challenges and it's painful. But my prayer is that you guys would know that if we all just keep our eyes on Jesus, He's going to take it and He's going to make it okay. Because He's faithful too. He wasn't lying when He said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. You know, those disciples that are in the boat in the storm and Jesus is sleeping, He's there. He's in the boat. Let us not forget that He's there. And so open your eyes. When you're in the worst part, in the worst struggles, open your eyes. He's there. Mothers, when you're worried about your kids and stuff, I don't know if there's a whole lot that you can do about that other than just hand it over to Jesus, because He's there. And He loves them. And He's going to protect them. And I know my mom's so far away and she loves me and she wishes that she could go and do all these things for me, but that love that we have through Christ, it's the only thing that's restored me and that has brought me to this point. I can stand before you and yeah, I have tears. But my tears are because God has carried me through this and I have joy. I do have joy, and my tears, it's just kind of beautiful to look at what God's carried me through and to look back and remember all of that stuff. And so, at this time, I want to close our service. And I want to close it with one of my favorite songs, and one of the songs that I had that carried me through some really hard times. And it's just knowing that God loves us and that He wants to be with us. And He'll never leave us. So would you stand with me as we sing?
He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of His wind and mercy. And all of a sudden, I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory. I realize just how beautiful You are and how great Your Yeah, He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. And we are His portion, and He is our prize. Drawn to redemption by the grace in His eyes. Grace is an ocean we're all sinking. Though heaven meets earth like an unforeseen kiss, my heart beats violently inside of my chest. I don't have the time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way that He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. Yeah, He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. Yeah, He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for your love and for the way that you carry us, Lord. Lord, there's no greater love. You are an amazing God. And you find us broken. And you make us whole. So God, as we leave this place, will we be moved by your Spirit? Will we be restored with the hope and the grace that we find in you and you alone? God, we love you. We love you so much. Thank you for this day. Thank you for every day that you've given to us, because it's a gift. It's an opportunity for us to show your love to others. It's an opportunity for us to get it right with people that we love. That there's distance between us, Lord. It is an opportunity for us to say what we need to say and let them know that you love them and that we love them, Lord. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. As you leave, honor the women in your life, the mothers. Show them love. But show everyone God's grace. Would you point to them? Would you share your stories? Would you point people to Him and say, this is the reason I have hope? It's because of Jesus. You were sent.